Morning, guys. Shooting another video for you today, and today we're just going to show you how we dropped in a snowmobile engine in the KJ Raycing VF1 kart. I know we've done a few videos on the same machine before, but today we're going to show you a few things we've been getting questions about. So one thing to notice on a snowmobile engine, the way it sits, we have a big exhaust coming out, and since we're running a two-stroke engine, we do not want to modify the exhaust on a two-stroke engine because it's tuned for the back pressure to keep the right resonance in the cylinder. So it's very important for us on the design to keep the pipe intact. So that causes us to mount the engine farther back than we would like to. We'll talk about at the end of the video, we'll talk about a potential solution to that that we are working on for a future project. So we'll just show you how we put in the engine, some of the challenges, and some of the things that we have to address when doing this. One of the benefits of running a snowmobile engine is that it's a CVT, so no shifting is needed, and it keeps the engine in the power, the effective power all the time with that. So if you're running a 60 horsepower engine with a CVT, you're getting 7 or 80-90% of the usable horsepower, where if you're running a shifter kart with 60 horsepower, you're maybe only getting 50 to 60% of the usable horsepower to the wheels. So because the engine's always in its optimal range with a CVT. So the important thing when mounting a snowmobile engine is the distance from the primary clutch to the secondary clutch. On this particular and most of the snowmobiles we've had experience with, it's always 12 inches from center of shaft to center of shaft. That needs to be perfect. So another thing to worry about when mounting this, the backside of the driven clutch to the backside of the secondary clutch has to be 5/8 of an inch stagger. So you run a straight edge through here, and that distance has to be there. There are gauges that are made for that. We were able to just clamp on a straight edge and do the measurements. So those are the two measurements when setting up your secondary to your primary. When doing this setup on Crosskarts, this is the second one we've done, we've always set up the secondary system first because it's easy to mount the engine where it needs to be. So we always mount the secondary where it needs to go. And part of this secondary then is the other side, which is the chain case from the snowmobile. We've had a lot of questions in some of the videos about how we're running brakes, the rear brakes. Well, when we go to the other side of the cart, we'll see that how the chain case works, but this is our master cylinder in here on the snowmobile chain case, and you can see the brake rotor mounted there. So it's mounted on this jack shaft between the secondary and the chain case. Now there are a couple links, failures that could happen. One, you have the chain case chain, and two, you have the drive chain. If either one of those failed, we wouldn't have brakes to the rear on this Crosskart, but we do have front brakes on it, so we have enough redundancy where we're not too worried about brake failure on it. So with that, we'll take a quick look over to the other side and take a look at the chain case. So we pop the cover off the chain case, and we can see that we have two shafts that run across on here. This is the shaft coming from the secondary clutch, and this is the shaft that will go to the drive that'll drive the main chain for the machine. Now this particular one has approximately a 2-to-1 gear reduction in there. It wasn't important to us what the gear reduction is. It can be changed, but it wasn't important because we had intended to leave the gearing the same as it was on the snowmobile, and any gearing we wanted to change we were going to do in the sprockets between the two. But this is a heavy duty timing style chain. It's set up in there, and this is the chain tightener, and that has a specific torque on the bolt. You can see you can barely move this chain on this system. Up here, this is the slides for the caliper. We can see the rotor coming around through here. If we look in the back a little bit, we'll see the two shafts coming across. Now, With this top shaft, there's some specialized machining that goes into the secondary clutch. We didn't want to worry about remachining a shaft, so we cut the shaft, we tapered it, we welded it together, and then we slid a sleeve over it and then welded it, the edges of the sleeves. Very common practice for what people do on the CV axles to get them to the right length. So we did that with the top shaft. The bottom shaft we did have to take to the machine shop and get a keyway cut in it for this sprocket down there. That sprocket can be cut any distance you want. Now, if you've watched our other video, we've tried to make the rear spool as narrow as possible to keep the footprint as narrow as possible. So we didn't matter how close or how narrow the spool is, because we can put the sprocket anywhere on this shaft. So we added a couple uprights to mount all of this system on. It's very important that these two shafts are parallel to each other and in the same alignment as the chain case is. So we can see that if I move the top shaft, the whole cart's going to move. It's just set up, it's tight, there's no slop in the chain. Nothing is set up that way. As far as gearing goes, right in here on a snowmobile on this shaft, there'd be some drive gears, some nylon plastic drive gears, and they're 8 inches in diameter. Well, we're using a 24-inch tire in the back, so our tire's 3 times the size of that 8-inch wheel. So the cart effectively was going to go 3 times faster than the snowmobile. We rated the snowmobile about 90 miles an hour. So that's obviously not feasible for a cart. So what we did is we reduced the gear reduction by 3 times from this sprocket back to the drive sprocket on the machine. Now in this case, we went to, we used a 14 tooth in the front, a 52 tooth in the back. We're at about a 3.7 gear reduction instead of 3. So we're 20% less speed than that 90 miles an hour. So we're about 72 miles an hour on paper. Testing, that seems about right. Where we ride in the forest, tight trails. Rarely do you get up to top speed on the machine where we're riding. So we did gear it down a little bit. It seems about right. We have another one with a snowmobile engine in it, and that one we left at the same 3 times gear reduction, and it's crazy fast, too fast. So that's why we reduced this one a little further on this cart. So in setting up the engine, remember we said that's the last thing we want to mount. We looked at the chain case, we looked at the 2 output shafts, and then the last thing we're going to mount is the engine. So we used this aluminum plate, mounting plate, out of the snowmobile. We also used the vibration isolations out of the snowmobile, and we mounted on 2 brackets here. So we had all that mounted, and then those just set on these cross beams underneath. So effectively we could move the engine forward, backwards, side to side to get all the measurements exactly perfect, and then just spot welded in the brackets, remove the engine, and then welded it in firm to get that 12-inch distance and that 5/8 offset. So that's a very simple way to set up a snowmobile engine in a cart. And again, we mounted these vertical pieces here to be able to mount our chain case, our secondary clutch, and our output shaft all ahead of time. We just had to leave enough room for the engine in here. So that's a very simple way to drop this in and get it going. Now we're in Minnesota, and the availability of snowmobile engines is infinitely easier than it is to get crotch rocket engines. And we already talked about the advantages of the CVT. Now some of the mid-2000 models Skidoo engines, they actually have reverse in them. And the way they do reverse is you're at idle, you flip the switch, and it reverses the timing. The engine doesn't really even backfire, it just starts running in reverse. Now, if we had one of those engines, and we're looking for one, with that system, we would run it in reverse all of the time, and we'd actually mount the engine up here, and we'd have it backwards so the exhaust came out the other way. So we wouldn't have to have all this room tied up for the exhaust. So that's one of the projects we're working on, is securing that engine, one we can flip into reverse as it's running. And it'll allow us to turn the engine around backwards. Obviously the secondary and the primary would be on the other side of the cart, but that's doesn't really matter. There's also a second way to add reverse using a snowmobile engine, and we'll talk about that now. So the other way snowmobiles run a reverse is they add a gear in right here. It's a gear that drives off of the chain, and then it slides in and out the second part of the gear and engages the second part of this wheel. So when you pull the cable, it'll engage this gear, and that gear will drive the primary output instead of the chain driving the primary output. So both of these gears here are doubled up, and then you just put a different chain case cover on. We haven't looked very hard for one, but for this model we think we could find one pretty easy. It'll probably, you know, be $100 or so to get a used reverse kit. But that's another way to put reverse on using a snowmobile engine. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and today we shot this video because we've been getting lots of questions on some of our other videos on how we did the brakes and how we did mounted the snowmobile engine and things like that. So we thought we'd shoot a quick video and show how easy it is to drop in a snowmobile engine. They're very easy to come by up where we live, and we love the CVT portion of it because we can just step on the gas and it goes. It's a fun ride. It's easy to go, and we hope to get some video for you guys, some riding action in one of the upcoming videos. We appreciate you guys watching and sticking around to the end, and thanks a lot, and be sure to subscribe.